Hi. What I want to do today is to start discussing the Renaissance. It's a bit of a shame to do it without pictures, and so I've got some pictures that I want to show you. I'll show them via the screen, and what you can do is freeze frame them to have a look, and that will provide one way of getting round it. I want to start off with, that means there's going to be a lot of fiddling around. I want to start off with Evans, because Evans mentions the late Renaissance, and he refers to it in terms of Mannerism, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be about Mannerism and what Mannerism actually involves. There's very little literature available online, which is annoying. I've put down on the bibliography, on the Moodle side, a couple of articles that are available, and you can get them digitally. But most of the other stuff you can't get. It's all hard copy. And I wouldn't worry about that. I'd be much happier if you looked at Evans and what made your way through that. I'm not going to be asking you in the exam or in questions or anything like that. I'm not going to be asking general statements on the European Renaissance, really only its implications for politics, religion, society. And I want to start off with perhaps one of the most important sculptures that has ever existed, and one that you probably haven't heard about. And it was known about in the Middle Ages because Pliny had written about this statue, and the statue was called the Laocoon, Laocoon, the Laocoon, and people knew about this because Pliny describes it, and they know the story of Laocoon, which is that he was a priest in the service of Poseidon, and he infuriated Poseidon either by trying to show that the Trojan horse was a fraud, or by having sex in the temple of Poseidon, which is not something you want to do. And Poseidon was cross with him. And you don't annoy the sea god. And the sea god sent sea serpents to ultimately crush him to death or poison him. And everybody knew the story. They knew this fantastic statue existed. And then people are digging a trench, I think it must be for a new terrace, in a vineyard outside Rome in 1506. And they dig up this statue, the statue that they knew existed. They've dug it up. And it creates an absolute sensation. And this is the picture of it. Probably not very good resolution. Look at I want you to look at two things. The head, which I'm homing in there on. The head and the limbs. Because the head will transform heads, the representation of heads across Europe, because it is a face of such misery and pain that it will be adopted as the face that Christ has on the cross. It will become the archetypal face of misery, even though normally one's eyebrows don't bulge when one's in particular agony, but the artist there thought that they did. And the other point is the limbs. The limbs look, again, tormented and twisted. You can go onto Wikipedia, just tap in Laocoon and it'll come up. And this has an absolute transforming effect on art. Now I'm going to struggle to find the next pictures. There we are. And it reverses everything that we think about in respect of art. And this is the typical, the archetypal Renaissance picture. Oh, fuck off. There we are, the Mona Lisa. In the form of a triangle, actually. Underlying most of what Leonardo does are geometric shapes. Have a look again, you can see it. There's a triangle that would form with its apex somewhere beyond the top of the Mona Lisa's head. So that's harmony, geometrical. We would see it in the dome, Brunelleschi's dome on in Florence, again based on a classical model, but at the same time it is conforming to proportion and regularity, and although it doesn't form a perfect sphere or half sphere, unlike St. Paul's, which does, it comes pretty close to it. The Renaissance, the High Renaissance, is about proportion, regularity, geometry, perfection, harmony. And this was the rediscovery of what the classical artists, what people thought classical artists were doing. And the Renaissance is, of course, not just about art and architecture. It also involves literature, the rediscovery of classical texts, and we've discussed that in humanism. It involves also ideas of the law, that the law should conform, ideally, to the type of Roman legal system where everything is written down and where you have full compilations of the law, so the law isn't just made up as you go along, which was what customary law was about. And some historians have argued that it affects the idea of the state, that a certain type of state is created, particularly in Italy, but then exported elsewhere, which aims towards some form of perfectibility, to create the harmonious exercise of power. I'm not particularly convinced about that. I think it's rather difficult to imagine these rather brutal despotisms that operate in northern Italy as being harmonious in any sense. But there we are, that's one idea that was put forward, the Renaissance state. Normally when people use the idea Renaissance state, nowadays they mean kings that spend lots of money on paintings. But you will notice that the Laocoon is not harmonious at all. The limbs are twisted, they are exaggerated, they are foreshortened, they are disproportionate, And one of the features of Mannerism is that its features are mannered. And I want to illustrate this by, I'm sure, a television series that you have watched or have heard about. That's called Friends. And it includes some appalling acting. The acting is generally abysmal in it. And none worse than Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston's acting is mannered, exaggerated, with unnecessary forms and expressions thrown in. She'll go things like, hey, there's nothing in the fridge. It's a completely mannered form of acting. If you like, she is showing drama by disproportionate reactions. And this is what the artists, mannerist artists, tend to do. And I'm just going to show a few of them. This is the classic one. And you can see exactly what I mean here. This is Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel. And just look at those limbs. Just look at the way that people, God and the angels, are disporting themselves, the attitudes that they've put themselves into. But my favourite beyond all is this one. Parmigianino. I always, when I show this to students, using a projector, which I can't obviously do now, we're having to use this not very satisfactory method, I always say, what is wrong with that picture? Look at it now. What is wrong with it? There's several things. There's, first, the baby is so perfectly proportional. The limbs are shown in such a way that the baby looks as if it's falling off the Virgin's lap. And secondly, the neck of the Virgin is disproportionately long. It's called the Madonna with the long neck. You can see it here. Have a look again. Madonna with the long neck. And what artists are doing in Mannerism is showing off their virtuoso ability to draw individual limbs, individual necks, individual features, but that the composition is, as a consequence, unrealistic and strained. And it is that straining that really reflects and looks back to the art of the Laocoon. And what I will finish off with is Robert Evans's comment that the Protestantism in the late 16th century is becoming strained. It is lacking in harmony. It is, if you like, the religious alternative, the religious expression, religious twin of Mannerist art. It can achieve no satisfactory or convincing synthesis. Now, this strikes me as itself as an argument strained, but nevertheless, it's one of the points that Evans makes, and for that reason, I have explored it with you here today. Thank you.